Hello. Welcome to Journey to Murder in the Family. I'm Dan Buchanan, the history guy of Brighton, Ontario. This video series was created from a PowerPoint presentation that I gave at the Sifton Cook Heritage Centre in Coburg on Sunday, August 28, 2022. After completing the presentation, I felt that the content might be interesting to some folks, so I decided to convert the story into video form and make it available on my website. The title, Journey to Murder in the Family, indicates that you will learn about the events and circumstances that eventually led to my decision to write the book, Murder in the Family, the Dr. King story, which was published in June 2015. The viewer should keep in mind that the writing and publication of the book occurred near the end of the journey. In fact, the focus here is more on the journey than the book. However, the video also includes material about the decisions I made and the work I did in producing the book, along with my experiences after the book was released. I hope you enjoy the journey. The title of the book was Murder in the Family, which means that the journey begins at home. Our home was the farm on the north side of the village at Codrington, which is on number 30 highway, halfway between Brighton and Campbellford. This aerial view of the farm was taken by my father, Charles Buchanan, in 1955. It shows the red brick farmhouse with the large lawn to the road, the big barn to the north, and all the other sheds and buildings that made up a typical mixed dairy farm in 1950s Ontario. The journey to the book began here, largely based on the story of Dr. King's memorial. As I would learn, Dr. William Henry King was buried at the southeast corner of the King farmhouse after he was hanged in Coburg in June 1859. This large granite gravestone was erected on this site by the family, where it would remain for several decades, there at the corner of the house, surrounded by trees and flowers. In fact, the memorial stood there at the corner of the house until around 1920. Lloyd Ames had grown up on the farm and was only 18 years old at this time. His mother was Linnie King, a niece of Dr. King. Over the years, she had become increasingly disturbed by the presence of the memorial standing at the corner of the house. As a deeply Christian woman, she could not abide the constant reminder of the notorious black sheep of the family. She was distressed that gawkers would stop their newfangled automobiles on the side of the road in front of the house and point toward the memorial and its pleasant grove of trees. One Sunday they returned from church and found several people standing around the memorial in their yard. Mrs. Ames had seen enough. She asked her two younger sons, Lloyd and Kenneth, to get rid of Dr. King's memorial. Being dutiful sons, the boys began by pulling the large granite stone out of the ground. Next, right there at the same location, they dug a hole in the ground about 1.5 feet deep and a little bigger than the memorial. They laid the memorial down in the hole and covered it with dirt and sod. Mission accomplished. Out of sight, out of mind. Now the story jumps ahead to the 1950s. Mary Ames had grown up on this farm as an only child. In 1949, she married Charles Buchanan, a young farmer who had developed a good reputation as the hired man at the Goodfellow farm in Mount Olivet. That meant that Lloyd Ames now had an experienced farmer to work with him on his farm. So when his daughter was married, Lloyd and Louise Ames moved to a house in the village, and the young couple moved into the old farmhouse. The farm prospered, and the family grew. There would be 4 children, and I was the second, born in 1951. In 1955, plans were afoot for a major upgrade of the septic system, which was south of the house. Before they started, Lloyd told Charles that before they run tractors and backhoes over that ground at the southeast corner of the house, there was something they should move. He remembered where he and his brother had buried Dr. King's memorial in 1920. He was able to poke the ground with a long screwdriver and hit on the stone. They quickly removed the sod and dirt to reveal the well-preserved memorial to Dr. King. At this moment, Charles Buchanan did what came natural to him in those days. He went into the house and got his camera. This was during his Kodachrome period. As a result, he snapped 2 beautiful pictures of Dr. King's memorial, for which I am eternally grateful. After the pictures were taken, they pulled the stone out of the ground. The best option for making sure that this stone was out of their way was the garden right there at the southeast corner of the house. They dragged the stone a few yards to the middle of the garden and buried it there. The expectation was that they would never have to deal with it again. It was not to be. About a decade later, one Saturday morning late in the fall, Charles Buchanan was finishing up the last of the fall plowing, which meant the small garden southeast of the house. He was almost finished, when suddenly a plow point caught the end of Dr. King's memorial, pulled it up, and broke it in half. As a 14-year-old kid helping around the farm, I heard the engine of the tractor roar unnaturally for a few seconds, and then cut off abruptly. I made a beeline for the garden where I knew Dad was plowing. The sight I witnessed was bizarre, to say the least. The big Massey Ferguson tractor sat in the middle of the garden with its large rear wheels dug deeply into the soft soil. The plow behind the tractor stuck up into the air, pointing at the tops of the pine trees along the west end of the garden. As I ran across the freshly plowed soil of the garden, all I could hear was my dad shouting some curse words that I knew were not to be repeated to Mother. The 2 pieces of the stone were stuck in between plow points, and it was a struggle to remove them. Once free, the pieces were unceremoniously dragged to the southeast corner of the garden and left in the lilac bushes by the road. Finally, Dad was able to complete the plowing. However, the episode was not over. The next day was Sunday, which meant that in the morning most of us were in church or Sunday school, all except for Grandfather. He knew nobody would be around, so he drove his Jeep up to the farm. He didn't want anyone to see what he was about to do. He went to the shop and found his favorite sledgehammer. He dragged the 2 pieces of Dr. King's memorial out onto the garden. Then he proceeded to pulverize the 2 pieces of stone into hundreds of little pieces. He gathered up all the pieces and put them into the back of his Jeep, then drove up No. 30 Highway to Goodfellow Road. Here he turned left and went up the old washed-out gravel road that led to our pasture land on Crammy Hill. When I asked him what he did next, he said, with great satisfaction, "I buried them in a dozen places. Nobody will ever find them." As far as Lloyd Ames was concerned, that was the end of the Dr. King story.